I don't think this conversation is particularly helpful to the government. If I was in the government, I wouldn't be thrilled with it.
The Conservatives continue to lead in the polls. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today, it's more good news with the polling data. We've got a panel talking about Carney's second meeting with Donald Trump. We got a bunch of other stuff here. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we got polling data coming from Simieritsch. This is Abacus data, so it's one of the best pollsters out there, showing the Liberals at 40%, the Conservatives at 41%, taking the lead here, at least from Abacus's last poll. But we've seen the Conservatives ahead here in the last about 2 or 3 polls. So Carney's plan here of using Donald Trump as the boogeyman, not getting a deal, is backfiring. The question is he going to get a deal now, or is he just going to keep kicking this can down the road and hoping that the polls don't slip any further? And basically all the rest here are unchanged. Simieritsch got this modeled out, so this would be 157 seats plus 13 for the Conservatives and minus 17 seats down to 152 for the Liberals. So another minority, conservative minority government. Moving ahead, we've got this one from Table Salt. Says University of Toronto master's students are now being forced to identify themselves to their classes as thin privileged or white settler in a disgusting self-loathing shame ritual. This is outrageous. He's not wrong here. You can see here thin privilege, professional power and privilege, white settler of European ancestry. What the heck is this crap? These universities are a toxic swamp of misinformation and gender ideology. It's a political cult designed to shame and divide people into as many categories as possible. And with that, Table Salt also posting this. Our Studios, a fitness studio in Halifax, charges twice as much if you're white versus if you're not white. I personally got pretty pissed off when I saw this because I'm so sick of the R word in Canada, and there's so many institutions that are R word against white people. Our Studios right here, Halifax. Here's their website. Here's Table Salt's screenshot. This is directly on the Passes website. If you go to buy passes, I went to Rio Pilates and yoga. Scroll down here, $30, can be used at any time, rest not included, valid all studios. And then they have the BIPOC rate, which is the BIPOC drop-in rate, Black, Indigenous, Person of Color. You get to pay half price, or white people pay double the price. This is disgusting race carism in Canada. And I did go on there and leave them a 1-star review because this is garbage. They should be fined by the ombudsman for doing this. Moving ahead, we've got a panel talking about Mark Carney going down to meet with Donald Trump. This is a tricky situation for Carney because if he doesn't come back with anything, his polling numbers will continue to drop. And I can only imagine they know that. The Liberals know this. So does this have something tied to that big military deal that I brought up a couple days ago?
Welcome back to Question Period. Prime Minister Mark Carney is going to give it another go, heading down to Washington, D.C. on Monday, where he'll meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. The last D.C. meeting was cordial, but ultimately didn't secure an end to American tariffs on Canada. Will the Prime Minister have better luck this time? And what happens if he can't secure any trade relief? Our Sunday strategy session is here to dig into the political stakes. Politically, what are the stakes for the Prime Minister heading into this meeting?
I think they're huge. You know, he's walking a tightrope. He has to somehow get some short-term relief. The tariffs are pounding away at workers, at sawmills all throughout BC and throughout Canada for that matter, and auto and aluminum too. But he has to not give away too much, right? We're about to go into CUSMA or NAFTA 2.0 renegotiations. He can't give away too much sovereignty of Canada on defense, on energy. He can't hurt workers of the future. So the question is, like, what's a win for Carney next week in Washington? And it's puzzling, really, because, you know, he's going down there in a diplomatic effort, but he has to come back with some kind of deliverable. So would I want to be a part of Carney's team right now in writing that communique in advance? I don't think so. But he has to show something that is being done because he has let so much slip. Not only the deadlines that he set for himself in the past, but he's given away things, right? He's rolled back the counter tariffs. He's removed the digital services tax. He's backtracked, frankly, on the global minimum tax. So we have to see some wins soon. And I'm really concerned, frankly, about what that might mean in terms of overall sovereignty or any damage to the long-term view, which is the CUSMA negotiations.
Surprising enough, that's the one take I've ever heard from Kathleen Monk that wasn't completely out to lunch. Like, what she said is true. They have to deliver something. I just said it. Otherwise, Carney's going to slip in the polls again. It's really quite shocking that it's taken this long for people to wake up to Mark Carney. The guy lied to Canadians, which was found out after the election, about the tariffs, about everything, about his investments. There's so many lies. I have a Carney lie tracker. Even if you hear one or two of those lies, people should get a whiff that this guy, this globalist banker, is serving himself.
What do you think about that framing, Corey, that essentially ultimately, I take Kathleen's point, like there has to be something tangible that you tell Canadians out of this meeting, I feel like, given what's happened over the last 6 months. At the same time, how careful does he have to be about what we end up ceding in exchange for that?
Yeah, I think there's a very, very low likelihood that there's going to be a deal coming out of this meeting. I think it's extremely low. And any notion that there's going to be a good deal at the end of this for Canada, I think has been dispelled over the past number of months as we've seen what's happened with other countries, frankly. There isn't a tariff-free option, and I think available to Canada in terms of this negotiation. We're going to.
I don't agree with that. I think there is a tariff-free option, but it has to be negotiated properly. And Carney's not doing that. He doesn't want a deal, right? So I think if they gave up enough and sweetened the deal, like make a really good deal where Trump would have to look at and say, you know what, I can't turn that down. This is going to be great for America. He can go back to everyone, bring all the press in and announce the deal he just got for America. It's so great for America. If a deal was that good, he wouldn't turn it down. And that deal is possible because we have so much in Canada, all our natural resources, critical minerals, oil, gas, you name it. The problem is Carney is not trying to get a deal. So I think he's right when he said that nothing will come from this meeting because Carney doesn't want a deal. But the question is, why is Carney going down there? As I brought up on the channel a couple days ago, and as you can see, I've added now Carney's direct conflicts of interest because he has so many now, we better keep track of them. These are ones directly enriching himself. He should be charged for this. This should be against the law, but apparently Canadian prime ministers are able to rip off taxpayers and enrich themselves in our country. And I'm talking about this one here, missile defense system, Lockheed Martin. Mark Carney invested in this M142 high mobility artillery system here, a $2.44 billion deal. That's CAD. So Mark Carney invested in Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin is going to be providing these. This deal is still in the works here, but is Carney going down there to solidify this deal because it's so important to his own bank account? That's what I'm thinking here. I'm thinking he's going to ink this because he wants to make sure this goes through so his Lockheed Martin stocks go up in value. Because otherwise, why would Mark Carney go down there? He has no reason to. The guy only serves himself. So we take a look at Lockheed Martin stock here over the past year. We'll go 5 years and we can see it's been bobbling around. Mark Carney got elected right there. So I mean, the stock has gone up a little bit since then, but we'll see what happened because right now the stock price is at 504. And this is a more difficult one to track because you can see there's a big pump here, but I don't directly follow Lockheed Martin and all the stuff going on in America. There's a lot of all that stuff with Ukraine and the defense contracting and stuff plays a lot into this. It's not just Canada, but we'll pay attention to this and see how much this pumps. But that's what I'm suspecting why Carney's going down there. It has nothing to do with getting a deal. For Canada, it's about getting a deal for himself.
We're going to take what the U.S. gives us, I think, is sort of the, what we should be looking at because that's sort of how it's gone for everyone else. I think the big question will be like the customs negotiations. That's not going to be settled. We've essentially have zero tariffs in all but the steel, aluminum, and obviously auto, softwood lumber. So those sector-specific ones are bad, but we're running with the lowest tariffs of anyone in the world for everything else. I just don't think that's bound to last. I think CUSMA is not going to go as well as it did last time, and I see no path for that being settled at this meeting.
Well, it kind of informs what I would characterize as like a highly risky environment for the Prime Minister and the federal government in this meeting, Scott. Like exactly what Corey, just laid out, right? Like we know that no one's getting a tariff-free deal. Maybe if they're able to come home and say, hey, we've got tariffs on steel and aluminum reduced to 15%. That's at least some kind of deliverable. But on the broad strokes of it, like who knows what the heck Trump is going to do, which feels like a very high-risk environment to head into.
I agree with that strongly. Really, I mean, all the knuckles are white, man. Well, why is this meeting even occurring? And I think a big part of its success, quote unquote success, will have to do with what we hear in advance of the meeting and how the context for it is set. Because, you guys are talking about, well, what can we expect from the meeting? What will the tangible gains be? What will the wins be? I think a lot of people are looking at it and saying, let's just hope we don't come away with further harms. Let's hope that the president, who appears to be particularly volatile these days in the context of the U.S. government shutdown, as he seems to sort of be in a mood of acquiring and exercising power in every domain available within his eyesight, let's just hope that he doesn't seem to turn his negative, nasty gaze on us for this meeting. So why are we there? And so So in many respects,
So he just said it. Why are we there? Why are they having this meeting? Mark Carney hasn't had any interest in getting a deal for the past 2 months, basically. But I just showed you why he's there. This is why he's there. He needs to make sure this deal goes through so he makes more money. Now, the question is, why is it that nobody on CTV, CBC, nobody brings this up? Nobody's digging into Mark Carney. Why has no one mentioned all of these? These are all direct conflicts of interest. If I were in charge, this would be jail time for every single one of these. Mark Carney should be forced to sell all of his stocks and put them in a GIC, and that's it. And they can easily do this. The biggest critique to this would be, well, if Carney was forced to sell all his stocks, he'd have big capital gains hit because he's taking profits. Well, then just put in a rule that the prime minister can sell stocks with zero penalty and it gets rolled over into a GIC. He doesn't take the money into his bank account, but it rolls into a GIC. He still gets a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% return and thus not conflicted. But this guy's beyond conflicted. This is ridiculous. I'm making this nice and clear so people can share it with their grandma or any CBC watcher out there. I think I might make another one that's his indirect conflicts of interest because, as you've seen on this video here with the major projects, he has multiple indirect conflicts of interest, including the container terminal here, seeing that he's invested in Canadian Pacific Kansas City, the railway. So any of the railway traffic that picks up because of this, then he makes more money from that. Stock value goes up, etc. Wind West, Port of Churchill, McIvenna Bay Copper and Mine, this Foran mining company. There's multiple indirect conflicts of interest as well. Not to mention this one here, Occidental Carbon Engineering. There's a bunch of them. So it really is quite something on these panels. They sit there and shrug like they have no idea. Do they just intentionally not research this stuff? They're not looking this up, or are they all just busy strategists that don't look up what's actually going on in our country?
I think the most important job is one that will happen prior to this meeting. I think, we need to hear from the Prime Minister and his officials, right? We need a sense of what are the expectations? What is the message? What might we anticipate? Because some people are going to look at this meeting and say, well, it couldn't possibly occur unless there's some sort of breakthrough. Others might look at it and say, my God, does this mean that supply management is being surrendered? Or is it something else altogether? And we might see
supply management should be surrendered. Why would we sacrifice the steel, the aluminum, the auto industry, the forestry industry for supply management? There's no good reason for that other than there's well-connected insiders who make a lot of money from this. People are greedy. Their actions are driven by greed and money. That's the Coles Notes of life here. And often these people end up at the top of corporations, in the government. These greedy people just feed on this desire for more money and more power. That's supply management in Canada in a nutshell. And unfortunately, it appears they're very well connected to the government, the Liberal government, because Carney rolled out that new law just before negotiations started that supply management couldn't be touched. What a ridiculous joke.
a deal on the Golden Dome, and so a defense partnership of some sort. I think some context in advance of the meeting, because expectations could be running rampant and they could be running in multiple directions. So I really think there's a job of setting context that needs to happen prior to it. This government, you get the impression it almost lives off an abundant confidence in the Prime Minister's obvious capability and competence. But that can't be the whole of your approach. You have to give people a sense of, this is what's happening. This is why this meeting is occurring. This is what you shouldn't fear. This is what you might expect. And if you can exceed those expectations, great. But if you don't set them, you're sure as hell not going to exceed them. And particularly in a context like this, which feels very, very laden with risk, because the president seems exceptionally volatile these days.
But to be blunt, Kathleen, if I look back over the past 3 months, let's say in the lead up to that August the 1st deadline and since, there has been no effort on the part of the federal government to set that context publicly facing. There has been, and I understand the impetus around not negotiating in public, not disclosing all the details of what's been happening behind the scenes. But even this week, the reason we found out that Prime Minister Carney and President Trump had spoken is because a reporter shouted a question on the way into, I think it was caucus, and the Prime Minister said, yes, we've spoken. And then when, how, why? None of those questions were answered. There was some testimony from Dominic LeBlanc, Minister LeBlanc, this week before a committee that again indicated a deal wasn't dead. But other than that, we know nothing about what's happened over the past few months.
Yeah, it could either be what Scott just outlined, which is just a great confidence in the Prime Minister to solve this as the CEO of Canada, and they have overwhelming and maybe naive confidence in his ability to settle this deal, or they're just hunkering down, and the PMO is just hunkering down and can't actually or doesn't want to put out kind of what the litmus test for this trip will be. I mean, surely one of the ideal scenarios would be a de-escalation of the 232 tariffs, some kind of pause or rollback, or at least a period in which they could kind of further debate them. You know, just this past week on September 30th, they slapped another 10% on softwood lumber. I mean, that
increase in softwood lumber, that's Donald Trump saying, hey, you're going to come meet me, then let's negotiate. And he's putting that on there to stick it to Carney to say, now it's time to negotiate because I'm going to just keep jacking this up. This is how Trump operates. He probably knew this meeting was going to happen, so he increased the tariff. Not a lot, but just enough to give him a little jolt and say, okay, are you going to come negotiate or am I just going to keep prodding you here? And that increase is, well, it's awful. It's awful for Canada's lumber industry. It's awful for Home Depot and other companies in America that buy Canadian lumber. It comes down to it, Carney's still not going to get a deal. I would be shocked if he gets a deal coming out of this other than signing that Lockheed Martin missile defense system deal, which enriches himself.
Will have an impact on direct workers, on mills across Canada. And the only thing we can hope for is that actually corporate U.S., the corporate United States, starts to speak about this, because who buys most of our wood from BC and other provinces? It's Home Depot that's based in Georgia. So hopefully they'll push back and they'll say how this is hurting their bottom line, and that could actually urge, Trump. I'm with Corey that I don't have a lot of faith that will actually happen, but that is one of the venues in terms of applying pressure for Trump to actually take a pause and a beat on these 232 tariffs that are damaging, our economy so greatly and hurting workers particularly.
Is there a way that, publicly facing, Corey, in your mind, they could set some sort of expectations ahead of this trip? Like, should if they were asking your advice, would it be to set some?
I would set the expectation that nothing's going to happen. Like, this is going to be a conversation because I just don't see how there's an agreement coming out of this that's better than what the status quo is. The end game here is a renegotiation of CUSMA. Right now, as bad as the 232 tariffs are for those affected sectors, it could be a heck of a lot worse. And for most countries in the world, it is a heck of a lot worse. And I don't think we should be, speeding towards a deal that's worse than the status quo, which is, I think, almost inevitable if you're looking at comparables with other countries. So I would be lowering expectations. Like with respect to the Home Depots of the world, to Kathleen's point, last time around we had companies in the United States who were willing to stand up and push back against administration when it was in their interest to do so. We have seen absolutely no sign of that happening this go around. Yeah. The friends and allies in Congress, in the Senate, governors, across the board, they've been cowed into silence. And I really think we're on our own. It's a much more difficult situation than it was last time. And
it's true. There's no real governors or mayors or anyone pushing back against Trump and the tariffs and all that. So Canada is on our own. Carney could make a deal. He's not going to. The Lockheed Martin thing is the smoking gun here. Are they going to make it seem like, oh, we're prepping things for CUSMA, this, that, and the other? Probably they'll spin this somehow. But really, we'll probably see that proposed deal with Lockheed Martin, the M142 missile silos, goes through, and that's what he got done in America.
Not to be too pessimistic, but I think it only gets worse from here.
So then to your first question, Scott, like, what is the point? And we talk about strategy, we talk about politics. Like, what is the point politically of going there on their turf to engage in that kind of conversation that could result in, as little as both Kathleen and Corey just described?
My guess, and to a certain degree, my point is, why should we be guessing? Why? Like, I don't think this conversation is particularly helpful to the government. If I was in the government, I wouldn't be thrilled with it, because we're speculating wildly, even as we seem to think that it's unlikely we'll see some kind of announcement. We're still speculating about that possibility. So why do I think they're going? My guess is the reality of the meeting is that it's come about because Trump has said, look, you know what? We've been talking by text. We've been sending telegrams and, balloonograms to one another. Let's actually just meet face to face. Come on down and let's talk about some stuff. So just like we're making this too complicated when we say, oh, well, what is the litmus test that can be set? What are the 10 standards that might be set that we can just tell us what the meeting is? Like, if the meeting is just, we received an invitation, we want to talk this stuff through, we don't expect any announceables, we don't think any breakthroughs are going to occur, this is a necessary and important conversation, keep things on track, particularly with CUSMA looming, then just say that. That sets, as Corey suggested, expectations seller low. And that's probably the right place to be.
Yeah, that would be the right place to be if that's what's going on. Trump's not going to just invite them for a meeting for no reason. The guy is super busy. Every country wants his attention. And Trump and his team already stated they don't like dealing with the liberal government because they're awful. They're arrogant, pompous. They're not working with them. They don't negotiate. So they're not going to bring them down there just for fun. Carney's team probably said, we're ready to ink this deal. That's why they're going there. And no other reason. Carney's team will spin it another way, though. When in reality, if we had an honorable prime minister, they'd be trying to get a deal badly because this is the state of Canada. These are all the American states, and here's Canada. We've got workers in every Canadian province earn less than workers in the US. The highest is Alberta, BC, Ontario, Quebec, Saskatchewan, all the way down PEI at the bottom. Canada desperately needs a deal. Unfortunately, Canadians voted in a globalist, elitist banker thinking he would have the honor and integrity of not serving his self-interest. And well, as you can see here, that's not what's going on.
Because, leaving people to speculate as we are, that maybe there is a deal, or maybe there's a deal, but it's not good enough. That's a zero help to government. That's not where I would be, and that's not what I would tolerate in public. I'd get into the vacuum and fill it fast.
Okay, I'll leave it on that. No one.
I don't disagree with him there. They should have proper optics and say what they're going to do, and just by leaving it open, it allows for wild speculation.